That morning, at the Westfield Classic Car Auction, no one looked at Lucas Hartley for more than 2 seconds. He arrived in work clothes, still carrying faint traces of engine oil, one hand holding a folded event program marked in pencil, the other holding the small hand of a 7-year-old girl wearing a t-shirt printed with a cartoon gear set. When Lucas raised his paddle and bid $500 on the rusted, immobile 1967 Mustang shoved into the far corner of the hall, laughter broke out from the VIP section. Isabella Crane, CEO of Crane Automotive Group, looked directly at him and spoke just loudly enough for the entire room to hear. $500? What are you going to do with a pile of scrap grow flowers in it? 30 days later, the entire city fell silent. Don't look away, because what Lucas did with that car will make you question everything you thought you knew about a man in oil-stained clothes. The Westfield Classic Car Auction was the kind of event that wore its wealth like a second skin. Held every year at the Westfield Convention Hall on the eastern edge of Ashford, it drew collectors, dealers, and automotive investors from 3 states. The hall smelled of leather polish and money. Men in tailored suits sipped champagne near velvet ropes. Women in heels checked their phones between lots. At the front of the room, 2 auctioneers in matching blazers kept the energy precise and controlled, the way people manage things when everyone present can afford to be patient. Lucas stood near the side aisle, not the VIP section. He had a folding chair but wasn't using it. Grace sat on his shoulders instead, her small sneakers resting against his chest, her eyes moving from car to car as each lot was wheeled out under the spotlights. She had a program too, her own copy, which she had been annotating with a purple marker since they arrived. That one has a crack in the headlight, she said, pointing at a 1959 Chevrolet being pushed past. Good eye, Lucas said quietly. He wasn't here for the Chevrolet. He wasn't here for the 1963 Corvette that sold for $62,000 in the third lot, or the Jaguar E-Type that drew a standing ovation when the winning bid hit $90,000. Lucas had come for the last item on the program, Lot 22. He had penciled a small circle around it 3 days earlier when he first read the catalog description, and his hand had been steady when he did it. The auctioneer's voice grew noticeably less enthusiastic as the floor crew pushed Lot 22 into position. The car came in on a rolling platform rather than under its own power, because it had no power to offer. The 1967 Ford Mustang Fastback had been sitting in a storage unit in rural Kentucky for an estimated 22 years. Its paint had peeled away in wide strips, exposing patches of gray primer and bare metal beneath. The front bumper was cracked and partially detached. The windshield had a diagonal fracture running from the lower left corner to the upper right. The interior, what was visible through the window glass, had been partially consumed by moisture and time. The auctioneer ran through the vehicle report in a flattened tone, the way someone reads a list of things that have gone wrong with a property no one expects to sell. Several people in the front rows stood and stretched. A few moved toward the exit. Sebastian Voss, seated 3 chairs to the left of Isabella Crane in the VIP section, leaned over and murmured something. Isabella glanced at the Mustang on the platform and then looked away, back toward her phone. Lucas looked at the car and did not look away. The opening bid was $200. The hall was quiet. The auctioneer repeated the figure, and the quiet continued. Then Lucas raised his paddle. $500, he said. The auctioneer paused. Sir, the opening is $200. You can start there if you'd like. $500, Lucas said again. Grace patted the top of his head. Did we get it, Dad? Sebastian Voss laughed first. Not a quiet laugh, but the kind that invites other people to join. A few of them did. And then Isabella Crane, without turning her head all the way toward Lucas, spoke the line that would follow her for the next 30 days. $500? What are you going to do with a pile of scrap grow flowers in it? The laughter in the VIP section was not cruel in the way schoolyard cruelty is cruel. It was the laughter of people who had never needed to think carefully about $500, and who could not imagine a reason to spend it on something that would require dragging it off the property. It was dismissal dressed as amusement. Lucas did not look at Isabella. He looked at Grace, who had not fully understood the laughter, but had understood her father's face, which remained calm and almost still. So she stayed calm too. She trusted his face more than she trusted the room. The gavel came down. Lucas Hartley was the new owner of the 1967 Ford Mustang Fastback, Lot 22, for $500. 8 years earlier, Lucas had been the head of restoration at Hollowell Classic Works, the most respected classic car restoration workshop on the East Coast. The firm's clients included private collectors whose names appeared in business magazines, a national museum that called twice a year, and 2 international auction houses that requested Hollowell's documentation to support provenance claims. Lucas had started there at 22 as a junior technician and had risen to lead the restoration department before his 30th birthday. His colleagues called him the doctor not because he was formal, but because he could listen to an engine run for 45 seconds and tell you what was wrong with it before he opened the hood. He left on a Tuesday in March, 4 years before the Westfield auction. His wife Claire had been killed in a car accident on the interstate outside Providence on a Saturday night when Grace was 3 years old. For 11 months after that, Lucas kept working, kept driving the 2 hours to the Hollowell workshop, kept coming home after dark to a daughter who needed a father who was fully present and getting a version of him that was mostly functional and sometimes hollow. It was Grace who made the decision, in the way that children make decisions without knowing they are making them, by needing more of him than the road could spare. He found a position at a smaller garage on the west side of Ashford. The work was honest and uncomplicated. He fixed what needed fixing, charged fairly, and came home in time to make dinner and check homework. His reputation in the city's small classic car community was quiet but solid. People who knew the industry knew his name. People who didn't know the industry looked at his garage and saw a man in work clothes. That was usually the end of the assessment. The night after the auction, after Grace was asleep, Lucas pulled a wooden box from under her bed, one she knew was there, and had been told not to open without him. Inside the box was a black and white photograph, printed on paper that had softened at the edges with age. It showed a man in his late 20s standing beside a car in front of a garage, somewhere flat and dry, Oklahoma, from the look of the sky. The car in the photograph was a Ford Mustang Fastback. The paint, even in black and white, had the quality of something that absorbed light rather than reflected it, something deep and deliberate. The man standing beside it had his hand on the roof and was squinting slightly into the sun. He looked like someone who had earned something and was not yet used to having it. The man was Joseph Hartley, Lucas's grandfather. The year was 1969. Lucas had been carrying the vehicle documentation that went with the photograph for 3 years. The original title, the build sheet, the window sticker, with the factory paint code printed in faded ink. The paint code read, Acapulco Blue. The vehicle identification number on those documents matched the number on the frame of Lot 22 at the Westfield auction. He had confirmed the match from the auction catalog before he drove to Westfield. He had known what he was going there to buy before he walked through the door. This was not a random Mustang. This was his grandfather's car. Joseph had sold it in 1988, during a year when the family needed the money more than they needed the car. He had spoken of it rarely, and only in the specific way that people speak about the things they have given up, that they wish they hadn't briefly, with a shift in the eyes, before changing the subject. He had never said he regretted it. He had never had to. Grace stirred in the doorway. She had come for a glass of water, and found her father sitting at the kitchen table with an old photograph and several sheets of yellowed paper. "Is that the car?" she asked. "That's the car." "Is it Grandpa's car?" It was. A long time ago. Lucas set the photograph down. "I'm going to make it right again." She considered this with the full seriousness of a 7-year-old who had been taught that mechanical problems had mechanical solutions. "Can you fix it, though?" It looked pretty broken. "Everything's fixable," he said. "You just have to know where to start." The next morning, a flatbed tow truck pulled the Mustang into Lucas's garage on Clement Street. A few neighbors paused on the sidewalk to watch the unloading. The car looked worse in daylight, the peeling paint more extensive, the chrome trim oxidized to a flat gray, the roof panel warped at the rear seam. Aaron Mills pulled up in his truck 20 minutes later. Aaron was 38, built wide through the shoulders, and had worked alongside Lucas at Hollowell for 2 years before Lucas left. He ran his own upholstery and trim shop across town now. He walked around the Mustang twice without speaking, crouched to look under the frame, and then stood up. "You're serious," he said. 30 days, Lucas said. Aaron looked at him. 30 days. From this, 30 days. Aaron looked at the car again. Then he took off his jacket and hung it on the garage wall. "I'm here on weekends, and I won't take money for it." Lucas spent the entire first day doing nothing but looking. He moved around the car slowly, pressing his fingers against panels, lifting sections of trim to check what was beneath, testing each door hinge for play. This was how he had always started, not with tools but with attention. The assessment had to come first. The work had to know where it was going before it began. What he found changed the picture considerably. The chassis was sound. Not merely acceptable, genuinely sound. No bending in the frame rails, no meaningful corrosion in the structural members. For a car that had been sitting undisturbed for more than 2 decades, it was the kind of discovery that a restorer recognized as rare, without needing to say it out loud. The body panels were a different story. Surface rust, deformation in the right quarter panel, and paint failure everywhere. But the skeleton beneath was honest. The engine was a Vate 390 cubic inch FE block, one of the more powerful options Ford had offered on the '67 Fastback. It had been neglected comprehensively. The carburetor was gummed past cleaning. The valve cover gaskets had failed. The timing chain had slackened. But when Lucas removed the valve covers and looked inside, the cylinder walls were not scored. The block had not cracked. It was a damaged engine, not a dead one. He found the note when he removed the instrument cluster, tucked behind the dash panel, folded once, written in ballpoint pen that had bled slightly into the paper over the years. Oklahoma, 1969. J. Hartley. Lucas stood still for a long time with the folded paper in his hand. Then he put it in his wallet, next to his driver's license. He called his grandfather that evening. Joseph answered on the 3rd ring, voice careful the way it always was when he wasn't sure who was calling. "I found it," Lucas said. The silence on the other end lasted long enough that Lucas checked the connection. Then his grandfather said very quietly, "Where?" "Westfield, Kentucky, before that. I don't know the whole path, but it's here." Another silence. Then, "Is it bad?" "It's bad," Lucas said, "but it's all there." Grace had fallen asleep on the couch in the living room by the time he finished the call. He carried her to bed, set her down carefully, and stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at her, the small, steady rise and fall of her breathing, the purple marker still held loosely in one hand. He went back to the kitchen and wrote out the schedule on a legal pad. 5 days of full disassembly, 3 days of cleaning, cataloging, and assessment, 10 days of parts sourcing and mechanical rebuild, 7 days of body work, 4 days of paint, 2 days of interior and trim, 2 days of final assembly, systems check, and road test. 30 days. The math was possible. It would not be comfortable, but it was possible. The parts would be the difficult part. Original specification components for a 1967 Mustang were available, but sourcing the correct pieces took time that the schedule did not generously allow. Lucas called 3 suppliers that first night and left messages with 2 others. He had accounts from his Hollowell years that were still active, and a reputation that the suppliers recognized when he used his name. By the end of the second day, he had commitments for the engine components, pistons, camshaft, valve train, crankshaft bearings, and a delivery window he could work within. On the 6th day, he drove to Callaway Auto Supply on the north side of Ashford to source gaskets and a carburetor rebuild kit. The store was run by a man named Douglas Callaway, who had been selling parts to serious mechanics for 31 years and who recognized quality of work the way a librarian recognizes a careful reader by small signs that accumulate into certainty. Lucas was standing at the rack of Mustang components when a woman came through the door behind him. He heard the door, registered the sound, and continued reading the specifications on a parts box. Isabella Crane stood at the counter and spoke with Douglas about a display component for the launch event of Crane Automotive's new heritage-inspired sedan, a piece she wanted sourced to a period-accurate specification for a promotional photograph. She was precise about what she needed and spoke without hesitation, the cadence of someone used to being the clearest person in any room. Douglas answered her questions and then looked past her at Lucas. "You know," he said, in the easy way of someone who has held a conversation in his store for 3 decades and sees no reason to stop, the gentleman looking at the Mustang rack there restored vehicles for the Smithsonian and Christie's London, among other places. Isabella turned. She looked at Lucas for the first time, the way one professional looks at another as a fact to be assessed rather than a detail to be dismissed. Lucas was reading the back of a carburetor kit and had not fully turned around. He nodded at Douglas. That was all. Isabella bought what she needed and left. On the sidewalk, she paused for a moment outside the glass door before walking to her car. She had not recognized him immediately at the counter, but she had recognized the name when Douglas said it. Hartley. She had heard that name in the context of restoration work once before, at a conference 2 years ago, in a conversation about the provenance requirements for a car that had sold at auction for more than $1.2 million. The work had been attributed to a restorer named Hartley from Hollowell Classic Works. She sat in her car for a moment, then drove back to the office. That afternoon, she asked her assistant to pull whatever professional record existed for a Lucas Hartley, formerly of Hollowell Classic Works, currently in Ashford. What came back was a career summary that did not match the man she had seen at the Westfield auction, the Smithsonian project, the Christie's documentation, a private collection in Monaco, a completed restoration that had been assessed by an independent evaluator and described, in a formal report she pulled up on her screen, as technically and historically the most faithful work of its